In this video, we'll take a look at creating and editing calendars. To get to your calendar settings, which is where you'll be able to create and edit your calendars, go into your settings and click on calendars. Before looking at creating and editing calendars, I'll briefly touch on the top menu tabs. Calendars, which is where we are now, is where you're able to create a calendar or a group calendar, or view and edit your existing calendars and calendar groups. The next tab is Preferences. Under My Preference, you can edit your personal meeting link, such as your Zoom or Google Meet link, and under Account Preference, you can adjust a few general calendar settings. These include in-app preferences, where you can adjust the day you want the week to start for your internal calendar view, and also included are your widget preferences. This is where you can choose language and time formats that will be shown on your calendar widgets, which are the calendars that you can send directly out and incorporate on your website for your leads to book in using. Similar to the in-app preference, you can also change the starting day as shown in a calendar widget. The next tab is Availability. This is another location outside of My Profile where you're able to update your personal user availabilities and time zone settings that, where applicable, are accounted for within a calendar's availability. The final tab is Connections. This is where you're able to integrate your personal Google or Outlook calendar, your Zoom link, and also the general account connection preferences such as a payment gateway, for example Stripe, and ads. Now let's go back to the Calendars tab and take a look at creating and editing a calendar. To create a calendar, click Create Calendar in the top right. Here you'll see 3 and soon to be 4 different calendar types. I'll briefly go over the types of calendars before we go into creating and editing each calendar type in depth. Firstly, we have round robin booking. Round robin calendars are assigned calendars that can have one or more users assigned to them. The availabilities on a round robin calendar are determined by the availabilities of each user on the calendar, the general office hours, and various appointment settings that we'll look at shortly. Typically, you would use a round robin calendar if you have more than one person that will be actioning or managing appointments on the calendar. The appointments may or may not be overlapping and can be personalized for more than one user. For example, a confirmation sent to a contact could say, "Your appointment has been booked with Joe for Thursday at 2 p.m. You could do this on an unassigned calendar or class booking calendar, however, you would only be able to do it for a single user's name. Next, we have unassigned or simple calendars, which were formerly known as event calendars. These calendars do not have specific users assigned to them, and the availabilities are determined by the general office hours for the calendar, along with various appointment settings that we'll also look at shortly. Typically, you would use an unassigned calendar if you're managing a definitive appointment schedule that one or multiple users take turns at managing and booking appointments for that don't need to be personalized. With unassigned calendars, you cannot have the system distribute appointments to your users, and you can only have it linked to one specific Google Calendar to block out or determine the availability around your general calendar office hours. The final, currently available calendar type at the time of recording this video is a class booking calendar. These are assigned calendars, however, you're only able to add a single user to a class booking calendar. Let's jump into creating a round robin or assigned calendar. Team and event setup is where you can select the users on your calendars, how the appointments will be distributed, and it's also where you can add your general calendar descriptions. To add a user, click Add User, and then select the user that you want to add from the drop-down. Repeat this for all users that will be taking appointments on your calendar. Once you've added your users, if applicable, you can add their individual meeting locations. This could be either a Zoom or Google Meet link that can be added to the booking confirmation and reminders sent to a contact. If these links are already set up within the user's profile, you can select the custom drop-down and choose the link you want to be sent out. Appointment distribution is used when the system is determining who to give an appointment to. Optimized for equal distribution is as it sounds. The system will distribute the appointments as evenly as possible with consideration to a user's availability. Optimized for availability lets you control the priority of each user receiving an appointment when there's multiple users available for a given time slot. By default, they're all medium, which will work the same as optimizing for equal distribution. However, you're also able to change these to either high or low. This is covered in more depth within the calendar's appointment distribution video. Next, if we want a contact to be able to select from the list of users above to book in an appointment with, we can toggle on this Allow Staff Selection During Booking setting. Now, let's choose a name, description, and URL or slug. The name will show up here, the description here, and the slug will attach to the end of your calendar URL. You can optionally add a logo that's cropped into either a square or circle and added to your calendar. At the bottom of this view, you can also choose an event calendar, which will change the color of your accented buttons and text on your calendar. You can see here that we've got the blue selected with our circle logo now showing. Above the event calendar, you'll see that we have two different widget types that you can select. Neo, which you can see here, and Classic, which you can see here. It's important to note that if you want a contact to be able to select a specific user to book in with, then you must use the Neo widget type. Now that we've completed our team and event setup, hit save and continue to go to the calendar's availability. Firstly, within availability, we have our appointment slot settings. As an example, let's say we want a contact to be able to book in for a 30-minute appointment and we want to block off a 1-hour period for each booking. Here, we would keep the slot duration at 30 minutes, we would update the slot interval to be 1 hour, and we can leave the buffer duration blank. The buffer duration between appointments can be used if you want a longer slot interval, specifically for times that have been booked. This means that your regular calendar availabilities will remain the same. However, when someone books in a time, it may block out the following time slots depending on what you've set the buffer to be. This would be used if you wanted to show, for example, appointments every 30 minutes. However, if someone books in, you wanted to block out a 2-hour period on your calendar. One other thing to consider with the appointment distribution is the appointments per slot per user. This is the maximum number of appointments permitted per slot for a user. If the number of appointments reaches this maximum, then it either switches over to the next user in the round robin queue or marks the slot unavailable for the prospect. If the calendar was for phone calls, for example, this would most likely just be 1. You can also specify the appointments per day. This is the maximum number of total appointments permitted per day on your calendar. If you don't want to restrict the number of appointments on a given day, this can just be left blank. Next, we have the calendar scheduling notice. The minimum scheduling notice is the minimum time notice you may want for an appointment, meaning how close to the present someone can book in a call, for example. If we made this, say, 3 hours and the current time was 8 a.m., then the soonest possible available slot would be 11 a.m. The date range is the maximum days in advance that someone can book in. If we set this to 7 days, then the calendar would only show appointments for, at most, the next 7 days. Next, we have the office hours. The calendar will use the hours that you set here as a wide range of availability, and then from here it will narrow down specific times as per the availability of the users on the calendar, with consideration to any applicable calendar integrations that have been set up. Within the standard settings, you can toggle the days that you want to make available by clicking on them, and you can define the range of times below. You are also able to set up multiple split times during each day by clicking on plus hours. For example, we could set Monday's availability from 9 a.m. till 11 a.m. and then also from 2 p.m. till 5 p.m. Custom settings can be used if you only wanted to have the calendar available for very specific, non-recurring dates and hours. Underneath standard office hours, you can also toggle on recurring appointments. Here, you can create multiple bookings with a single booking. If you always wanted to follow up an appointment at the same time, 1 week later, for example, you could set repeat to weekly and times to repeat 1. If the repeat appointment falls within a slot that's not available, you can choose whether you want the calendar to skip the booking, overwrite the booking, or book in for the next available slot. Next, we'll hit save and go to the final calendar setup step, which is the confirmation page. Under form settings, you can select a custom form if you require someone booking in to provide more information than just their first name, last name, email, and phone number. You can also select to use Sticky Contact, which will autofill a contact's information if they have previously put in their details. Under the notification options, you can select the notification type and who this gets sent to. You can also set up workflows that trigger when an appointment is booked that sends out internal notifications and text and/or emails to the content booking in, which means this wouldn't be required. In additional options, you can choose whether you want the calendar to auto-confirm the appointment. If you don't have this selected, you'll have to manually confirm appointment requests that come through. You can allow your Google Calendar to send invitation or update emails to attendees. You can allow the contact to reschedule their appointment through a rescheduling link. When an appointment reschedule has been submitted, it will update their appointment to the new appointment date and time. You can allow the contact to cancel their appointment. And finally, you can choose to assign contacts to the user that they were booked in with each time an appointment is booked. Under these options, you can add additional calendar notes, a Facebook Pixel ID that can be used for tracking, and you can also add custom code that's loaded on Calendar Load, which can include HTML and JavaScript. The final step is the form submission message. This is the message that will show up after a contact confirms their appointment within the calendar itself. You can choose for this to display a custom message, or you can have them redirect to a specific URL upon appointment confirmation. Now that we've set up our round robin calendar, let's click complete. We can now view our calendar to make sure that it's all set up correctly by clicking on the action drop-down and hitting copy scheduling link. We can paste this in a new tab to preview our calendar. If we wanted to make any changes to our calendar, we can simply click on the action drop-down and click edit to bring up all of the calendar settings that we just went through. So now that we've gone through the setup of a round robin calendar, I'll quickly go through the differences in setting up an unassigned calendar and also a class calendar. Firstly, let's look at unassigned calendars. The main difference to note for your simple or unassigned calendar within team and event setup is that there are no appointment distribution settings, as you can't assign users to these calendars. The availability of an unassigned calendar is based only on the office hours and any integrated calendar. At the bottom of team and event setup, you can link a calendar such as your Google Calendar, and you can select whether you want to sync these calendars to be one-way, meaning that your calendar will only receive events on your Google Calendar, and two ways, meaning that your calendar will receive events from the Google Calendar and will also share bookings to your Google Calendar. You can also disable the trigger altogether. Let's save and continue. Within availability, the only difference to note is that the appointments per slot setting is for all bookings across the calendar. This slightly differs from assigned calendars, where this setting is for the appointments per slot per user. If we save and continue, we can see that the confirmation settings remain the same. Now, let's look at the last available calendar, which is the class booking calendar. This calendar type would typically be used if you want to book people in for a class that's run by a specific user at fixed time slots. Within team and event setup, you'll see that you can add a user to own the class. A class booking calendar differs from a regular round robin or assigned calendar, as you can only assign a single user. This means that there isn't any appointment distribution and staff selection settings. Let's save and continue and take a look at the differences with availability. Here, you'll see that you can't define the appointments per slot per user and appointments per day. Instead, you can define the seats per class under seat availability. This is the total number of users that can book in for a specific class or time slot. Again, if we save and continue, we can see that the confirmation settings remain the same.